In this video, I'd like to take a look at the Guides tab in the FiberFX Strand Modeler. Before we dive into the Guides tab, if you haven't already seen the video where we cover the basic overview of the interface and the Fiber tab, I would suggest that you take a look at that and then come back to this. Okay, so you're back, you've watched that video, and let's take a look at the Guides tab. Before we do, I'm just going to grow some hair quickly, so I'll go over to Hair, Grow, and then let's increase the number of fibers. I'm going to go with 900, and let's get some length on there, 500 millimeters. And I'm going to add to the edge quantity, let's do 12. Okay, so ready to hop over to Guides. So I've got my fibers, and I could use these fibers, I could generate them and then later use those as guides in layout to drive where the hair is going to be placed. Or I could just use the 2-point polys as hair, but I'd rather use the FiberFX render for that. But what I can do is I can add guides to control where these 2-point polys, where these fibers are going to be. So it's kind of like guides for guides if you plan on using these for guides for FiberFX. So let's start by just adding one guide. I've got all these fibers and I want to control them with a guide. So I'm going to come over to Add Guide. Okay, and we can just grab this handle, pull it down, and we can see that we're shaping all those fibers with this one guide. Now that's because the interpolation is set to sharp wide, but we'll take a look at the other options there and how we can go about changing that. Okay, so I have the one guide. If I wanted to create another guide, I can create as many as I want, and we'll do that. I can also scale the guides. Let me just select that. I'm going to hold down Shift and click on it, and we'll scale it. See, now if you scale the guides, you're actually scaling the fibers. So you want to be careful because you might have already selected the scale on the hair that you want. So just be careful with that. But just know you can go ahead and change that. Now you can also change the type of spline that you're working with here. Right here, spline type, you have interpolated and approximating. Interpolating splines pass through each knot of the guide, whereas approximating splines act more like Bezier splines. Interpolating splines can be bent tighter, approximating splines are smoother. So you have a couple options there. Okay, so let's go ahead and throw a couple more guides in there. So Add Guide, just click here, and as you can see, now we've got a couple guides in there. They're affecting different parts of the hair. And I'm just going to click and drag. I'm just left clicking and dragging. Okay. Now, say I want to affect both of these. I'm going to hold down Shift and click. So now I've got both of them selected, and with Shift still held down, I'm going to click off in this area, and I can start to shape multiple guides at once. This really comes into play when we get a lot of guides in there. Okay. So that's a real quick way to adjust our fibers when we have multiple guides. Okay, so let's say we're going to go with this mop top here. Now at any time I can save off these fibers. I can also save the guides, not these fibers but these guides, so that I can use them later if I'd like. Okay, so once we have a few guides, let's add a couple more. Let's click and add, and we can get whatever hairstyle we want just by kind of brushing it into place using these guides. If we want to get rid of a guide, we can select it. So I'm holding down Shift, and now that would be moving it. If I deselect it, if I hold down Shift, select it, or hold down Shift and rectangular drag the selection, I can delete the guide, and now that guide is gone. I can clear all guides if I'd want. So now I have no guides. Another way to create guides would be to go into the Add Guide dropdown, and I could create a guide for every fiber that is on the that is currently displayed right here, which in this case would be 900 guides. I don't think that's necessary, but that's just an opinion. We could place a guide for each polygon that's on that surface, or each point. Let's do each polygon. So as you can see on the root here, all those blue dots represent each polygon, and we've got the guide. We can just go ahead and start manipulating each guide. Okay, that could take a while. You can see it's changing the guides, but I mean, it would take a long time to place all those. So the idea is to use as few of guides as possible. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and clear the guides. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop back over to the Fiber tab, and I'm going to drop this down to, say, 6. Or let's do 12. And then what I'm going to do is go back over to guides, use the current guide fibers, and now you can see why you might want to use that, because you could use these settings. Now what's cool is we can set all of this up. Okay, let's commit to this and see what happens. So say that's what we want to do. We commit to it. Okay, and in our current these are our guides, and these are our fibers actually, and then in layer 2 are the actual guides, and we can save that layer. The reason why we have that layer is so that we can later go back and work with it. So I'm going to come back and go to the FiberFX. So we'll go ahead and grow the hair again. So we'll go over to hair surface, grow. Let's get it back to the original 900. Then for size 0.5, and then 12 for the edge quantity. And then let's go ahead and see what we can do with those guides. So we'll come over to the Guides tab, and under Add Guides, instead of current fibers, all polygons, now we have some options. Let's pick layer 2, those guides we were looking at, and there we go. So now I have access to those guides. Of course, they are being styled using IK. If we turn that off, we're just going to be affecting the last node in the chain, and we can select different the different nodes in the chain here in the select node. And we can also add nodes, which is going to lengthen the hair, and we can delete nodes. I'm going to go ahead and clear guides, turn IK back on, and let's take advantage of this interpolation. Okay, radius bundle and bundle bias only affect certain interpolation, so you'll want to get familiar with which ones those are. I'm going to take advantage of one that I really like that uses these to create a quick hairstyle. So let's add one guide, and with one guide I want to create a hairstyle. I'm going to just pull this down, and yeah, we could call this a hairstyle. I think I'd get busted on that. It's not a very good looking hairstyle. Okay, well, just an opinion. Not a very good looking hairstyle. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it in interpolation mode to, we have these different interpolation modes to affect this. So instead of selecting here, I'm just going to left click on the root, and as I cycle through the different interpolations, you'll see we get the radius that we can control. It's controlling it there as well, so that's affecting less hair. Okay. But you'll also have colors, so you'll get familiar with which setting without even having to look over here to read. So I'm going to cycle through to the blue, this light blue, that I really like. Okay, you'll see why in just a second. Let's size up our radius. Okay, I want to just encompass that hair. And now what I'm going to do is with the bundled mode, I'm going to bundle it. So let's do 50. And wow, look at that, getting a ponytail. I'm liking the setup on this. I'm just going to increase that and adjust the bias a bit. Okay, pull it back in. Okay, just adjusting my settings. So I've just pulled the hair into a ponytail, and I didn't have to go and manipulate a bunch of guides to do it. So let's call this styled. We've got our little ponytail here, but you'll want to play with the different interpolation. Lots of things you can do. The more guides you have, the more you're going to want to adjust the radius, the fall off of how how the fibers are going to be affected by those guides. And that'll give you full control instead of moving a guide and it affects hairs that you really don't want it to affect. Okay, so let's go ahead and commit to this, and we'll come over to the last layer, and we've got our guides that we can use to draw hair using FiberFX and layout. So again, that's just a quick look at the Guides tab in the FiberFX Strand Modeler. It's a really handy tool to get in there, quickly make the guides that you want. Whether you're going to use these two-point poly chains for FiberFX or for anything other, anything else that you might want to use two-point polys for, it's one of the fastest, if not the fastest way I know of to go in and style these two-point poly chains to get a look that you're after.